So very good morning. We are now studying. Last day we have described up to the case control study. Today we will start cohort study onwards. So what is cohort? Cohort is a group of people having sharing similar characteristics. Cohort is a group of people having some common characteristics. So group of people having some common characteristics is the cohort. So you are the cohort of NEET PG examinee of 2026. You are a group of cohort. So group of cohort of 1990, those who are born in the 1990 or 2000. So these are the cohort, group of people having some common characteristics. So how cohort study is done? Unlike the case control study, which was effect to cause, case control study, already the outcome has happened. Described last day that the lung cancer patient and we are back. So ঠিক আছে So in case control study, already the outcome, so effect to cause, therefore this is said to be the retrospective study. But in cohort study, cause to effect, this is said to be the prospective cohort study. So cause to effect, we will now start with the some exposed person and then we will start in the cohort study. So suppose we want to establish the relationship between the lung cancer and smoking. So what is the smoke? What is the exposure? This is the exposure and lung cancer is the outcome. So we will start from the exposed person, exposed and non-exposed group of people having the some exposed, that is the smoker, and non-exposed means such your non-smoker. So there are suppose 50 exposed person or 50 smoker and 50 non-smoker, and we will follow up for certain period of time. Suppose 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. Long follow-up is required. Follow up for a certain period of time, and then we will see how many of them is developing the disease, or not. So there we will form a 2x2 table. Like this. So we will start from the exposed here. Exposed, non-exposed. Exposed here means what? Exposed here means such a smoker. Non-exposed means such a non-smoker. Here is the disease outcome. Outcome is here. That is the developing the disease or lung cancer here, and not disease person, that is the no lung cancer. After the follow-up, we will study like this. So suppose we have started with the total 50 exposed person and 50 non-exposed person, and out of them, suppose lung cancer developed among the smoker is suppose 30, and 20 will be definitely the no lung cancer, the patient with the exposed with the no lung cancer, and non-exposed person, suppose here is the 20 and here is the 30. So total, this column is supposed to be the A, this is the B, this is the C, this is the D. So how will you write? Incidence among exposed. incidence among exposed. What is that? This is the total exposed. Incidence among exposed is the 30. So 30 by 30 plus 20. That is equal to your A by A plus B. This is the incidence among exposed. Incidence among non-exposed. Incidence among non-exposed is equal to 20 divided by 20 plus 30. That is equal to your C by C plus D. This ratio is said to be the relative risk. Relative risk is said to be the incidence among exposed by incidence among non-exposed. That will come as the 30 by 50 divided by 20 by 50. So 30 by 20, that is equal to your 1.5. What is the interpretation? Chance of developing lung cancer is 1.5 times in smoker than that of the non-smoker. Non-smoker से smoker में lung cancer होने का chance 1.5 times. So 1.5 times smoker than that of the non-smoker. This is the interpretation of the relative risk. What is relative risk? Again repeat. Incidence among exposed and incidence among non-exposed. Numerical based question may sometimes given in the examination. So you have to frame the 2 by 2 table. Always put the exposed here, non-exposed here. E and D. D ऊपर में, नी नीचे में. हमेशा D पहले आता है ना, इसलिए D ऊपर में. Disease, non-disease, exposed, non-exposed. उसका बाद A by A plus B divided by C by C plus D. Incidence among exposed is 30 by 50. Incidence among non-exposed is 20 by 50. So incidence among exposed by incidence among non-exposed, that is the relative risk, which will come as the 1.5. Now coming to the attributable risk. Attributable risk. There are some other factors that may lead to formation of the attributable risk. Attributable risk is expressed as incidence among exposed minus incidence among non-exposed divided by incidence among exposed. So what was the incidence among exposed here? 30 by 50. 30 by 50 minus incidence among non-exposed 20 by 50 divided by incidence among the exposed is the 30 by 50. Therefore 30 minus 20, 10 by 50. 10 by 50 by 30 by 50, that is 1 by 3. That means what? Attributable risk is 1 by 3, means 33.33% population is 31 by 3. That is equal to your 33.33%. This proportion of the people, 33.33%, proportion of people is developing lung cancer, due to the some other factor apart from the smoking. This proportion of the people is developing lung cancer due to some other factors apart from smoking छोड़ के भी some other factor, maybe some environmental factor, some pollution related factor, they are responsible for developing the lung cancer in 33.33% population. This is meant by the your attributable risk. So what is the major advantage of the your case cohort study? Major advantage and disadvantage. Major advantage and disadvantage of your major advantage is the incidence. As we are moving forward, we are starting from the cause and we are finding out the effect after long follow-up. So incidence can be calculated. Incidence can be calculated, which was not possible in case of case control study, not possible in case control study. केस कंट्रोल स्टडी में हम लोग इंसिडेंस कैलकुलेट नहीं कर पाता है क्योंकि वहां पर ऑलरेडी डिजीज आउटकम हो चुका था. यहां पर वी आर एक्सपोज टू द cause to the effect, therefore we will be able to calculate the incidence can be calculated, relative risk can be calculated, attributable risk can be calculated. These are the some advantage of the your cohort study. What are the disadvantage? Disadvantage number one, not suitable for rare disease. Not suitable for rare disease. It is not suitable for rare disease is number one. Secondly, long follow-up is required. Long follow-up is required. Therefore, sometimes patient may leave the study. Attrition is the one of the problem. Attrition, the desired sample size which you have started, then they may not follow up the further. So some people may leave the study from the in between the बीच में से छोड़ के चला जाएगा. तो attrition is the problem. Long as the long follow up is required. Thirdly, it is a costly than the case control study. So there are these are some advantages and disadvantages of your of cohort study. Now something regarding nested case control study. Yes. Left में क्यों?
लाइट जो है ना सर्कल के बाहर.
यहाँ पर बोलो कितना, ये इतना. हाँ, बोर्ड को यहाँ पर होने से मेरा बॉडी हो जाए ना, इसलिए ठीक है. देखो हाँ, ये सही है. तो चलो नहीं, बोर्ड शिफ्ट नहीं हुआ. तो बोर्ड शिफ्ट नहीं हुआ.
ठीक है ना,
सही है. तो किसको और कुछ नहीं आ रहा है.
तो कोई शेडो नहीं.
तो अच्छा है. तो चलो. So nested case control study. Actually, case control study is nested within the cohort. So we'll start from a cohort. Selected and data obtained by interview from here. Starting from the cohort, we will start with the data collected during starting of the study. What source of the data? Maybe some interview, some blood sample, maybe some clinical examination, etc. And we will follow for the certain period of time. And those who are developing the disease, people will develop the disease, and some people will not develop the disease, So these are said to be the now case, these are now said to be the control. Now retrospectively केस और कंट्रोल अगर है तो उसमें से रेट्रोस्पेक्टिवली वी विल कंपेयर देयर interview whatever the data obtained here in the beginning of the cohort. So case and control are now within the cohort, therefore no selection. There's what is the major advantage of the nested case control study, that the selection of the case control is separately not required. Selection of case and control is separately not required. They are within the cohort. They are within the cohort. They are within the cohort. So some people will develop the disease. They are the case and control. They are compared with the previous one. So case control in the nested case control study, basically this case and control are nested within the cohort. That's why this is said to be the nested case control study. Next study type is the randomized control trial. Randomized control trial. This is an example of experimental study. And some intervention given. This is done to assess efficacy, safety of a drug, vaccine, or any therapeutic procedure. Surgical skill or something like that. So this is an experimental study. Intervention is given and done to assess this. Next, how this is done? This is done by, first, suppose our question is whether INH is protective in childhood tuberculosis, whether this can be given as the preventive medicine in case of to prevent the childhood tuberculosis. So suppose there are 1,000 population, 1,000 children. Out of these, 100 sample size is collected. 100 sample size is collected. First, we have to do, out of this 100, those who are already suffering from the disease are excluded. Those who are already suffering from disease are excluded. Suppose 10 children are already suffering from the tuberculosis. 10 children are already having the TB, so they are excluded. Now we have the 90 children, those do not have tuberculosis. Now these 90 is randomly allocated. These 90 children, randomization is done. Maybe some lottery technique. No one will know who will give to the two group. Number one group is the 45, number two is the 45. They are divided into two groups. One group will receive INH as the prophylactic, and these 90 children is in close contact. Obviously, this 100 sample is collected. They were in the close contact with their relatives, and obviously these 100 children were also in the close contact. So these 90%, 90 children is in the close contact with the TB. They are randomly allocated in the two group, 45 and 45. One group is given as the prophylactic INH, and the second group is not given INH. Rather, placebo is given. Placebo means same medicine, same type of the medicine, same looking, but the different efficacy. Maybe some vitamin with the similar looking they will receive. So now out of the 45, some will develop the disease and some will not develop the disease. And out of these 45, those who are receiving the placebo, some will develop the disease, some will not develop the disease. Now, how will you calculate? Suppose suppose 10 person is developing the disease, so therefore 35 will not develop the disease. Here, those who are not giving the INH, suppose they are 20 is developing the tuberculosis and 25 obviously will not. So incidence among INH, those who are receiving the INH, उसका अंदर में incidence होगा 10 divided by 45, total was the 45, and incidence among placebo, that is the non-exposed person, will be the 20 divided by 45. So incidence among INH by incidence among placebo, that will be 10 by 45 divided by 20 by 45, that is equal to half. That means what? Those who are receiving INH, they have the half chance of the developing, or they have reduced chance of developing the tuberculosis than those who are developing the placebo. That means INH is protective, और इसको रिवर्स वे में सोचने में, those who have receiving the placebo, they have developing two times chance to develop tuberculosis than those of INH. Therefore, INH is protective. So one of the major problem of the randomized control trial is the long follow-up required here again. So some people, again, attrition is the problem maybe. And secondly, blinding is done to ensure the participation. Blinding can be of three types: single blind, double blind, triple blind. Single blind means participants not aware. Double blind means neither participants nor the researcher. Here, neither participants nor researcher nor the analyst or statistician, those who are analyzing, analyst, or those who are. So this is the triple blind study is the best, and heart of RCT is the randomization. ठीक से randomly allocate करना. These are the few points regarding your randomized control trial. Next হচ্ছে bias. Bias is the systemic error. Bias is a systemic error developed during the study. Study करने के वक्त में there some bias are developed. One of them is the Bergsonian bias. Admission rate bias. This is also known as admission rate bias. Due to hospital case and control being systematically different from each other. Suppose patient with two concurrent diseases are more likely to be admitted. Patient with two concurrent disease are more likely to be admitted than single disease. Patient with two concurrent disease are more likely to be admitted than the single disease, single condition. So, due to hospital case control being systematically different from each other, so if we take case and control from hospital setting, so there will be a bias. केस जो है उसका साथ एक तो concurrent disease रहने का चांस है. So suppose we are developing we are try to assess the smoking and the lung cancer relationship. So if you take the lung cancer patient, they may have some other condition, other lung condition like the emphysema or COPD, etc. And also if you take the control from the hospital, they have some other diseases like your COPD, emphysema. So they mimic, their symptom sometimes mimic the lung cancer and may suppress the exact fact. So lung cancer in the hospital, case and control from the hospital, if you take, so patient with the two concurrent diseases are more likely to be admitted as single. So this type of the bias is the admission rate bias. That means due to hospital case control being systematically different from each other, due to the hospital case and control systematically different from each other, therefore if you take case and control both from the hospital, then there is the bias that is known as the Parkinsonian bias. Next, Niemann's bias or survivorship bias. Niemann's. Otherwise known as survivorship bias. Suppose in a case control study, there are 50 cases of MI, 50 myocardial infarction cases. So out of them, suppose 30 have regular exercise. Out of the 50 myocardial infarction cases, 30 people do their regular exercise. And suppose there are 50 healthy control, 30 do not, 30 also have do regular exercise. तो देख के कैसा लग रहा है? देख के लग रहा है ऐसे कि there is no, apparently looking that regular physical exercise is not productive. Apparently looking कैसा देखने में लग रहा है? Apparently it is looking that this regular exercise has no effect. Regular exercise has no effect because इन लोगों के अंदर में भी 30 कर रहे थे, इन लोगों के अंदर 30 कर रहे हैं, 30 रेगुलर एक्सरसाइज कर रहे हैं. तो जो रेगुलर एक्सरसाइज कर रहा है तो 50 out of the 50 the proportion is the same. That's why it's looking that 30 regular exercise जो हो है माने regular exercise has no effect in the prevention of in protecting myocardial infarction, but 30% of the case of the AMI die within the 3 hours. Those who have survived other cases may exercise protected them from the AMI. What I have told? So these myocardial infarction cases, suppose 30 people regular exercise, so most of the people die within 3 hours. Most of the people in myocardial infarction most of the people, most of the means 30% of the people, 30% of the people die within 3 hours. Those who have survived, here the cases, maybe exercise protected them from death. Okay, so those who have survived these cases, survivorship bias, those have survived because of the exercise, because of exercise delayed their, those who have survived because of exercise delayed their mortality, or delayed their death. This is known as what? Survivorship bias. And finally, confounding factor is very, very important. Confounding factor. कौन है? क्या लिखा है बोलो? Which one? Neiman's bias or survivorship bias? So out of the 50 people, out of the 50 MI, 30 exercise. Out of the 50 healthy individual, 30 not exercised. By 30 also do exercise. So देखने में कैसे लग रहा है? देखने में लग रहा है कि this is not protecting. This is not protective for the developing for the myocardial infarction. This is the healthy individual. These are the healthy individual. So देख के लग रहा है apparent that they are not protective. But actually 50 MI जो सर्वाइव किया है ड्यू टू द एक्सरसाइज, जो एक्सरसाइज करता है उसके लिए वो जो यहां पर जो 30 है इसका अंदर में इंक्लूडेड, इसका डेथ नहीं हुआ है बिकॉज ऑफ द एक्सरसाइज प्रोटेक्टेड देम फ्रॉम डिलेड ऑफ द मोर्टेलिटी. माने एक्सरसाइज करने के लिए इन लोगों को ये बच गया है, ये लोग मरा नहीं है. 50 MI पेशेंट जो है यहां पर, this 30 people basically survived due to the exercise. Understood? Yes, sir. Okay. Next, confounding factor. Three points. Confounding factor. 3 point. Point number 1. Associated with both exposure and disease, associated with both exposure and disease. Number 2, distributed unequally in the study and the control group. Distributed unequally in the study and the control group. Study and control group. ये है number 2. This is known as the differentially distributed. Number 3, independent risk factor of the disease outcome. Independent risk factor of disease outcome. These are the 3 points. Statement based question. All of the following are true except, all of the following are true regarding the confounding factor except type of the question is expressed. So associated with the both exposure and disease, distributed unequally in the study and the control group, that is the differentially distributed, and it is an independent risk factor of the disease outcome. So suppose we are doing a study with the alcohol consumption. This is the exposure and relationship between whether they are developing what? Developing suppose oral cancer. Oral cancer. Alcohol consumption and the oral cancer. Smoking is a confounding factor. Because it is an independent risk factor for the oral cancer. Independent. ये exposure नहीं होने से भी it is an independent risk factor for the oral cancer. And it is associated with the both exposure and the disease. That is the oral cancer. This is the disease. That means smoker can develop, those who are alcoholic, they consume smoking, and smoking can individually do the oral cancer. And secondly, it is distributed unequally. Among them, some of them are smoker, among them, some of them are smoker. So smoking is a confounding factor. If we do not remove this confounding factor, there will be a bias. So you cannot tell that the solely alcoholic consumption is responsible for the oral cancer unless the smoker from the both the alcohol consumption group are removed. So first, during the study, we have to remove the smoker from the alcohol consumption because smoking individually can develop the oral cancer. This is the minimized by randomization, restriction, matching, stratification, etc. This confounding factors to be removed before the study. Okay, so these are some few example of your different types of the bias. Any query up to this? Sir, confounding factor or risk factor? Confounding factor are one type of the risk factor. That is independent risk factor for the disease outcome. जो disease outcome जो है confounding factor is independent risk factor of the disease outcome. Independent risk factor. यहां पर जैसे था your oral cancer. So oral cancer का independent risk factor for the disease outcome. Or any other question up to this? Because we are now moving to the next part of the chapter. That's why how it is reduced. It is reduced by randomization, restriction, matching, stratification, multiple regression. These are different techniques for the reduction. Number one, randomization. It is minimized by. Number one, randomization. Restriction. No need to go to the detail, only to know the matching, stratification, and finally multiple regression. These are some statistical technique. Multiple regression. Any other query? Okay, next we are moving to our next part. Infectious disease epidemiology. ये था जनरल एपिडेमियोलॉजी। इन्फेक्शस डिजीज एपिडेमियोलॉजी। ফার্স্ট হচ্ছে এপিডেমিক। Clearly in excess of normal expectancy. What is the main term? Clearly in excess of normal expectancy. Every year, suppose we expect some common cold 20 to 30% in the people. This is the year, successive year. Suppose 1 year you have seen that the peak is like this. So this is our expectancy is this much proportion of the people will have the common cold during a particular year. This proportion of the people, 20% people always suffer from the common cold, but clearly in excess of normal expectancy. This is the epidemic. Epidemic means clearly in excess of normal expectancy. जहां पर एक भी रेबीज केस नहीं है, मान लो यूएसए, no single cases rabies is found. So one case is there, is said to be the epidemic. Or suppose in India, India is polio free. So suppose few cases of the polio here in excess, जो नो केस है तो उसका हिसाब से अगर 4 या 5 केस भी हो जाता है, so that is said to be the your epidemic because that is clearly in excess of the normal expectancy. In normal expectancy से क्या है, जो वैल्यू रहेगा उसका +2 स्टैंडर्ड ग्रेटर देन 2 स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन is taken as the mathematical criteria for developing a disease to be epidemic. Next, time distribution. Time distribution. First is the single exposure point source epidemic. Single exposure point source epidemic. What are the criteria? Single exposure point source. Number one, sharp rise and sharp fall. Like this. Sharp rise and sharp fall. Clustering of cases in narrow interval of time. Multiple cases in the narrow interval of time. Clustering of cases in narrow interval of time, and all cases develop within one incubation period. All cases will develop within one incubation period. These are the 3 criteria for the single exposure point source epidemic. Single exposure point source epidemic. Again, all of the following type of the question may be your examination question: sharp rise and sharp fall, clustering of cases in narrow interval of time, all cases will develop within one incubation period. Railway Man जो सीरीज था, वेब सीरीज by K.K. Menon based on the Bhopal gas tragedy is very ideal example. Cholera, chickenpox, measles, food poisoning, these are the few example of the Single exposure, point source epidemic. Food poisoning, number 1. Measles, cholera, chickenpox, and Bhopal gas tragedy. These are the single exposure, point source epidemic. Next, continuous or repeated exposure. Number 2 type, time distribution. Common source, continuous or repeated exposure. Common source, continuous or repeated exposure. Sharp rise but fall with the multiple secondary tertiary waves. Sharp rise but fall in number of cases by secondary waves. Sharp rise but not sharp fall. It will end by multiple secondary waves. Fall in numbers with multiple secondary waves. Contaminated well in a village. Contaminated well in a village. शॉर्ट प्राइस केस बहुत ही ज्यादा होगा एक संग, बट धीरे धीरे सेकेंडरी वेव ऐसे मल्टीपल सेकेंडरी वेव का हिसाब से फॉल करेंगे. कंटामिनेटेड वेल इन ए विलेज इज एन वेरी आइडियल एग्जांपल. कंटामिनेटेड वेल in a village. Next is the propagated epidemic. Gradual rise and gradual fall over a long time. Gradual rise and gradual fall over a long time. Over a long time. Gradual rise and gradual fall over a long time, and cluster of cases here. Next, endemic. Endemic. Usual or expected frequency of the disease. This is we expect. Usual or expected frequency. Usual or expected frequency of the disease within the population group. It's a constantly present within a geographical area. This constantly present within a geographical area. This is meant by the endemic. Okay. Now, for the two term, hyperendemic. Constant presence of the disease तो है ही, because this is the endemic. Constant presence of the disease, but with the high incidence prevalence affects all age group equally. High incidence and prevalence and affect all age group. Affect all age group equally. Jojo disease is not related with the age. Some infectious diseases like dengue, malaria, etc. that may show hyperendemic. That is below the epidemic and above the endemic. High incidence and prevalence, but epidemic अभी टच नहीं किया है, greater than 2 standard deviation of the previous year गया नहीं है, but about to go to the epidemic is known as the hyperendemic. Okay. Next is the holoendemic. High level of infection beginning early in life. High level of infection beginning early in life and mostly affect children. ARI, diarrhea, etc. ARI के अंदर में न्यूमोनिया, etc. So holoendemic, high level of infection beginning early in life and affect most in the children population. This is the holoendemic and hyperendemic. Hyper means all age group equally affected. Holoendemic mainly affect children and it begins early in the life. Pneumonia, diarrhea, etc. is the holoendemic. Next, epidemic when worldwide, that is known as the pandemic. Epidemic globally. Epidemic, small geographical area, maybe town, city, village, etc. or block is known as the outbreak. Same thing, epidemic, clearly in excess of the normal frequency. But localized, local, small geographical area like this is said to be the outbreak. And globally, it is known as the pandemic. Scattered case, sporadic, scattered. Now, clustering of the cases, sporadic. Zoonosis, transmitted from zoonosis, transmitted from animal. Zoonosis, एनिमल से ट्रांसमिशन हुआ, 3 टाइप्स, एंथ्रोपो zoonosis, zooanthroponosis and amphizoonosis. Zoo and anthropozoonosis, zooanthroponosis, amphigenesis, anthropozoonosis, zooanthroponosis and amphigenesis. So this is transmitted from zoo to animal, means হচ্ছে this direction. That means zoo to anthropo. Anthropo means human. That means animal to human transmission. very common: rabies, plague, anthrax, hydatid, echinococcus, rabies, plague, anthrax, hydatid disease, hydatid cyst. So anthropozoonosis, zoo to anthro, zoo to anthro. So this is zooanthroponosis, anthro to zoo. Anthro means human, anthro to zoo. So human to animal. Human to animal transmission. Human TB. Tuberculosis in cattle. Tuberculosis in cattle, which is transmitted from human being to animal. And amphigenosis, either direction. Amphigenosis, either direction. Human and animal, vice versa. Both direction it can be transmitted. Trypanosoma cruzi, Schistosoma japonicum. This transmission may occur in either direction, amphigenosis. And metazoonosis, transmitted biological by invertebrate. Metazoonosis means by invertebrates. Invertebrate vector. All arboviral infection, arthropod bone, and the plague are the example. Plague is also, but write down here arboviral invertebrate vectors, like all arboviral infection, arboviral infection. This is about your zoonosis. Next, incubation period. Incubation period. Infection to first sign and symptom. Infection to first sign or symptom. Incubation period depends on number one, generation time of pathogen. Number two, infective dose, portal of entry. And number four, individual susceptibility, immunity power. It depends principally on the four factors. Okay, incubation period depends upon the four factors. Generation time of the pathogen, कैसे मल्टीप्लाई किया है, इन व्हाट फैक्टर दे हैव मल्टीप्लाइड. सेकेंडली इन्फेक्टिव डोज, कितना इनपुट किया है, कितना इनपुट किया है. सेकेंडली पोर्टल ऑफ एंट्री, कहां से एंट्री किया है. एंड फोर्थली इंडिविजुअल ससेप्टिबिलिटी, That is the immunization power of individual. Time required for 50% case to occur. Time required for 50% case to occur. Multiple choice question. Median incubation period. Time required for 50% case to occur. Median incubation period. Next question. Receipt of infection to develop maximum infectivity. जब मल्टीप्लाई करते करते ऐसा समय आएगा जब मैक्सिमम इन्फेक्टिविटी generation time known as generation time. Okay, next, maximum infectivity. This is nearly is equal to incubation period. Generation time इंक्यूबेशन पीरियड का करीब करीब ही वैल्यू होता है. नेक्स्ट, डिजीज इनिशिएशन मीन्स pathological changes started to disease detection. डिजीज कब डिटेक्ट करेंगे. पैथोलॉजिकल चेंजेस डिजीज इनिशिएशन टू डिजीज डिटेक्शन typically said for NCD latent period. Typically used for NCD, non-communicable disease. They have the long latent period. Suppose diabetes mellitus कब स्टार्ट हुआ है कोई नहीं जानता है, लेकिन डिटेक्शन तबीयत खराब लग रहा है, थोड़ा यूरिनेशन, increased frequency of the urination, increased thirst, these are the symptoms developed. The patient tested with the fasting PP and he or she is diagnosed. So disease initiation to disease detection, this has no particular value. Latent period is very much variable for the non-communicable diseases. You cannot say properly. It can be said always in the years, 5 years, 7 years, 6 years, etc. You cannot promptly say like the incubation period, that the incubation period has certain value, this to these days. Okay? So suppose falciparum malaria 10 to 14 days, like that. Influenza 0 to 72 hours, like that. But you cannot say here within the days, few years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, like that. Next, first case in the community. Primary case, secondary case, or index case? Primary case. First case, whether that is detected or not by the health worker, but the first case in the community during the epidemic is the primary case. Okay. Case detected by, cases developed through the infection from the primary case. One primary case, secondary case, secondary case, and secondary case. These are all secondary case. So secondary case is what? Secondary case is cases developed through the infection from the primary case. Cases developed through the infection of primary case. This is known as what? Secondary case. These are all multiple choice questions. Gap between the onset of the primary case and secondary case is known as the serial interval. This is the timeline. This is the primary case. This is the secondary case. This time period between primary and secondary cases is known as the serial interval. So gap between the onset of primary case and secondary case. Gap between onset of primary case and secondary case is known as the serial interval. Next is the index case. First case that comes to the notice of the investigator. First case that comes under the notice of investigator or health worker, whatever may be, is known as the index case. Sometimes may be primary. Suppose this is the primary case, secondary, 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 secondary. So suppose this case is developed, index case. Sometimes index case may be the primary case. This can, whichever may be, index case may be primary case, may not be primary case. Sometimes secondary or tertiary case may be the your index case. First case that comes under the notice of the investigator. First case reported to the health system. This is the index case, is the first case reported to health system. Health system is known as the index case. Next is the secondary attack rate. Secondary attack rate. It has a numerator, it has a denominator. केस ऐसा तो एग्जाम्पल नहीं होगा. इंडेक्स केस जो केस হচ্ছে ইনভেস্টিগেটর का पहले आएगा उसका एग्जाम्पल नहीं होता है। हेल्थ वर्कर घर में जाके और हेल्थ वर्कर के कंप्लेन किया है कि यहां पर सपोज ऐसा कोई एक तो केस है, मान लो मलेरिया और डेंगू, कभी भी उस एरिया में डेंगू नहीं हुआ है, तो एक केस जो हेल्थ वर्कर के नोटिस में आया है, दिस इज द डेंगू केस और दिस इज द पोलियो केस, वट एवर मे बी, उसका एग्जाम्पल नहीं होता है। जो केस पहले हेल्थ वर्कर से आएगा और हेल्थ सिस्टम का अंदर में नोटिस होगा, दैट इज योर इंडेक्स केस, उसका एग्जाम्पल नहीं होता है। चलो नेक्स्ट, सेकेंडरी अटैक रेट, नंबर ऑफ exposed person, number of exposed person developing the disease within the range of incubation period, number of exposed person developing disease within incubation period, this is in the numerator, number of the exposed person developing the disease within the incubation period in the numerator, denominator total number of the exposed of susceptible contact, total number of exposed susceptible contact multiplied by 100 is the secondary attack rate. Primary cases are excluded both from the numerator and denominator. Primary cases are excluded both from numerator and denominator. So look, number of exposed person developing the disease within the incubation period. So suppose there are 6 person in a family. 6 person in a family. Out of them, 2 already suffered from the measles. Already suffered from measles. And 1 developed measles. So this is the primary case, 1 developed the measles. So what will be the numerator? Number of the exposed person developing the disease within the incubation period. So 1 developed the disease, measles, and followed by 2 of the family members. 2 of the family members developed measles. One suffered from the measles, developed the measles, and the 2 from the primary here, 1 developed the measles, and from this person 2 other family member also developed the measles. So what will be the numerator? Number of the exposed person developing the disease within the incubation period, that is the 2. This thing will not be included. This thing will not be included. So numerator will be 2, because 2 of them, number of the exposed person. Who are the exposed person? 6 person were exposed. 6 person were exposed. But the primary cases are not included or excluded from the both numerator and denominator. Only 2 person is suffering from the measles. This 2 will be in the numerator. Total number of the exposed susceptible contact. So exposed susceptible contact. These 2 person will not have the chance to develop the disease because measles gives lifelong immunity. Measles gives lifelong immunity. So there will be 3% total number of the exposed susceptible contact. ये दोनों तो चला गया, and 1 already developed. This is the primary case. This should not be included in the denominator. But these two and those who did not develop the disease, that is your 3 multiplied by 100, 66.66% is the secondary attack rate. Understood? Any query regarding secondary attack rate? Any query regarding secondary attack rate? It describes basically how much infectious disease, how much is communicable. That means yes, SAR measured by communicability is how much is communicable. That basically measures the secondary attack rate. Understood the numerical which I have explained? Suppose mumps, pertussis, chickenpox, okay, measles and smallpox. Mumps 86%, pertussis 90%, chickenpox also 90%, measles 80%. This is 35 to 40%. So what does it mean? Smallpox has less secondary attack rate, means chance of developing the others was less in case of the smallpox, but case fatality of the smallpox is much higher than that of the chickenpox. Chickenpox secondary attack rate high, but CFR case fatality rate wise, case fatality proportion wise, this chickenpox is supposed to be the, oh my god, one minute, power off. ओके जावेद यहां पर देख लो ठीक ठाक है कि नहीं. चिकन पॉक्स 90%, but case fatality wise chicken pox 1 to 2%, but small pox
सर कुछ बोलिए.
ऑडिबल. पावर ऑफ हो गया था. ऑडिबल है अभी. विजिबिलिटी ऑडिबिलिटी हो रहा है.
कुछ बोलिए नहीं तो कुछ.
एम आई ऑडिबल. पावर ऑफ हो गया था इसलिए पूछ रहा हूं. एम आई ऑडिबल. और विजिबिलिटी एनी क्वेरी. ऑडिबल तो ओके. नहीं ऑडिबल होगा तो बोलोगे. हाँ एकदम देन रेस्पॉन्स करोगे. सो दिस इज अबाउट योर सेकेंडरी अटैक रेट. secondary attack rate. Now, what is the difference between control, elimination and eradication? Last described. Now, control means पहले फेज होता है एपिडेमिक फेज, उसका बाद कंट्रोल फेज आता है. कंट्रोल मीन्स डिजाइन्ड टू प्रिवेंट और रिड्यूस एज मच एज पॉसिबल इंसिडेंट्स, prevalence. and economic burden. All will be decreased to a limit that is meant by the control phase. Broadly, control of a disease has three components: controlling the reservoir, breaking the chain of transmission, and control of susceptible host. Control of reservoir, breaking the chain of transmission, breaking the chain of transmission, control in susceptible host. Control in susceptible host. So control means decrease incidence, decrease prevalence, decrease economic burden to the society, and control involves three things. Number one, control of the reservoir, breaking the chain of transmission, and control in susceptible host. So number one, what is meant by sources and reservoir? The person, animal, object, or substance. This may be person, animal, object, or substance from which an infectious agent, from which an infectious agent passes or disseminated to the host. Disseminated to the host. This is meant by the source. Reservoir on which the infectious agent lives and multiplies. On which infectious agent lives or multiplies. That means depends primarily on survival. Depends primarily for survival. Depends primarily on survival. Okay. Source and reservoir. So person, animal, object, substance from which the infectious agent passes or disseminated to the host. This is the source. Reservoir on which the infectious agent lives or multiplies. Depends primarily for the survival. Source and reservoir. Source and reservoir are not synonymous. Hookworm, tetanus, typhoid. 3. In hookworm, source is contaminated soil. Reservoir is a human. Reservoir is man, but source is the contaminated soil. In case of the tetanus, both the source and the reservoir are the soil. Both the source and the reservoir are the soil. But infection, in case of the typhoid, source may be feces or urine of the patient, contaminated food, milk, water, contaminated food, milk, water, feces and urine of typhoid patient, but reservoir is the case or carrier of typhoid. Therefore, we can say source and reservoir are not synonymous. So, this chain source or reservoir, two different modes of transmission, it will reach to the host. This is the chain. We need to break down the chain. We need to break down the chain. Okay. So source and reservoir may be reduced. The food, water, or the soil, whatever may be, and the modes of the transmission can be reduced by the isolation, quarantine, and susceptible host. Immunity power can be increased by immunization. So up to this is your infectious disease epidemiology. Any query regarding this? Because next will chapter will start a separate chapter. Any query? We are moving to the next chapter. We cannot revert back to this chapter again. Okay. After the 5 to 10 minutes break, we'll start screening of the disease. Okay. Have a break of 10 minutes. I am coming just. Okay, break for 10 minutes.